person with us. Good evening to those joining us from our local time zone, and a very warm welcome to all attending from around the globe. From the American University of Beirut, AUB, it is my distinct honor to welcome you all to our 32nd mentoring talk, a series that inspires, motivates, and empowers. These talks illuminate a sense of discovery, passion, and innovation. They convey the spark of inspiration by unfurling new passions and goals in each one of us, which is the main objective of our transformative education thread program here at AUB. Sharing wisdom and advice will only help us flourish and remain driven to our goals. We strive to build bridges between innovators and explorers. Let the wisdom of the masters enlighten and give confidence to our young minds. We are truly honored to host this afternoon the commendable Rektorin of Heidelberg University, Professor Dr. Frauke Melchior, a spirit of innovation, perseverance, and wisdom. Professor Dr. Melchior is only the second female Rektorin of Heidelberg University since its inception in the latter half of the 14th century. This mentoring talk is organized in partnership with the prestigious Angewandte Chemie. I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Suzanne Toby, Executive Editor of Angewandte Chemie, for joining us on this panel. Obviously, to truly appreciate Rektorin Melchior's brilliance, we must delve into the series of events that marked her career. Her journey is a testament to both her academic valor and pioneering spirit. With that in mind, Rektorin Melchior's academic journey began with a degree in chemistry from the University of Marburg and the University of Bristol. She obtained her PhD in 1990 from the University of Marburg with groundbreaking work on still bean synthase from grapevines. This was the start of a very productive career characterized by pioneering research and mentorship in biochemical and molecular biology fields. Her postdoctoral undertakings led her to the Max Planck Institute for Biophysical Chemistry in Göttingen, Germany, and the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla, USA. It was during this period that she made one of her most significant scientific contributions, the molecular discovery of the SUMO protein family, as one of the key breakthroughs in the study of post-translational modification and cellular control mechanisms. This led to the opening of new frontier in understanding cellular events, proteins, and proteomics by revealing post-translational modifications and how they affect human life and diseases. In 2018, the Federation of European Biochemical Societies bestowed on her the EMBO Woman in Science Award. The latter recognizes not only her incredible contributions to the scientific community, but also her generosity in guiding and mentoring young researchers. At the time, she had already supervised more than 40 postgraduate students and postdoctoral researchers in her lab, while laboring with 10 additional mentees through her participation in various programs. Her legacy is not just engraved in the records of scientific discovery, but also in the lives of countless students, researchers, and collaborators she has mentored along the way. Rektorin Melchior exemplifies how dedication, curiosity, and resilience can break barriers and forge paths for innovation and progress. Her work continues to inspire countless research publications and offers profound insights into many discoveries. The title of Rektorin Melchior's mentoring talk is The Joys and Struggles of a Career family in the life sciences, a very personal perspective. In her own words, embrace unexpected turns in science and in your life. They may open new doors and opportunities. Let us now warmly welcome Rektorin Melchior, who will share her invaluable story and inspire us all to pursue our passions with the same determination. Without further ado, Rektorin Melchior, the floor is all yours.
Dear Dr. Kaafarani, thank you so much for your very kind introduction. I'm really flattered and I've no idea where you got all this information from. It's a great pleasure to be here. I really look forward to...
I must admit that I have a team of very talented students and a group of them, they did all the research work and they got all the information about you. So the credit goes to my team. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So it's a great pleasure, and I have to say I was very amazed when I looked at some of the earlier mentoring talks about also your engaged students and the fantastic questions. So I really look forward to get into dialogue. Good. What I wanted to do is, so I don't have a presentation. I will have prepared a little presentation without slides, just go through different steps of my career. And I hope I have some interesting insights for different career stages. So I think I would like to take the first paragraph I want to speak about is, you know, be open to opportunities and allow yourself to fail. So I started to study chemistry, as you pointed it out. It was at the beginning of the 80s in Germany, 1981. And at that time, when I started to study chemistry, it was a time when our German industry would not hire women in chemistry. They told us throughout my whole studies that women in research and production is no way. Perhaps they give us a job in documentation or so. Luckily, life has really changed significantly, so we've come a long way. However, when I started to study, I considered always both academic career and industry, being very optimistic that life will change. And I really did not worry about future perspectives. I enjoyed very much what I was doing while I was doing it. My first love was actually physical chemistry. And after my pre-diploma exam, I considered that I should perhaps switch to physics because that would be perhaps the better angle. And so I took a semester off and attended physics lectures in theoretical mechanics. I was totally fascinated and intrigued and really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, when I tried to complete the weekly requirements to fill out to answer physical questions, I had to admit that my math was really not sufficient. I continued the lectures, but I failed to get the grade for it. So unfortunately, I had to move back to chemistry and did not switch to physics. But I enjoyed it very much anyways. My second love, scientific love, I discovered when I joined the University of Bristol during my studies. It was an exchange program of my university. So for half a year, I stayed in Bristol. The first 3 months, I took a training, a teaching lab together with British students. And the second half, for 10 weeks, I had to do an internship. And I joined a lab in organometallic chemistry, and I got totally fascinated and intrigued. I really loved it. I actually earned my first co-authorships during that internship. And I was convinced after finishing all requirements in Germany, I would want to go back to Bristol and do my master thesis and PhD thesis there. But again, life had something different in mind. So I moved back to Germany and I still had to do I had to choose a final subject. And of many offers, I decided to choose biochemistry. And I have to admit, I really hated it. I found it absolutely terrible because at that point, with the textbook that we had, with the way it was taught, it really felt like this is nothing you can understand. It's just a million of facts that you need to memorize. it was a disaster, and I really disliked it. And I have to admit, I didn't even attend the lectures, and my grades were quite poor. But in the end, I had to do a lab rotation, like with all practicals and with all topics in our study program. And I immersed myself into a 6-week program in the lab. And it was a very fascinating program. It was a great postdoc who was my supervisor, who explained it to me in a way where I started to realize, oh, biochemistry is something you can actually understand. I finally found also a textbook that was much better suited to my style of learning. So it was the Stryer, which explains biochemistry in a very chemical way. I fell in love with biochemistry at that point. My diploma exam was then decent, and I decided to do also my PhD, my diploma thesis, and subsequently my PhD thesis in that lab. So for me, it was always like, give me enough time to dig very deep into a particular topic, and I start to find it fascinating. And it was, in a way, sheer coincidence that I ended up with the biochemistry. I think if organometallic chemistry would have been my last topic, I probably would have built a career in that topic. Anyway, so I did biochemistry in plant sciences, plant-fungal interaction. So how do plants defend themselves against fungal attack? I really enjoyed that a lot, and I had planned to build my long-term career in this topic. So in the middle of my PhD, I had already an idea which lab in the US I would want to join for a postdoc. But again, life took a very different turn, because then I fell in love, this time not with a scientific topic, but with my significant other, who is still my partner 35 years later. Problem was, he had just left Marburg, the town where I was in the middle of my PhD. He moved to Göttingen, and there he had joined a research group in the Max Planck Institute, where he had started his PhD. But I mean, it was 2 hours away. We saw each other in the weekends. We both loved science and enjoyed very much that we could share that passion. And we both wanted to go to the US after graduation. The plan was, because I was 2 years ahead of him, that I would probably go ahead, move to the US, and he would then simply follow when he had finished his PhD. Well, again, this was a nice idea, but then, of course, we had already talked about perhaps having a family at some point. This simply happened much faster than we had planned. So I found myself pregnant in the middle of my PhD thesis, living in one city, and my partner 2 hours away. Good. I had to do a little bit of readjustments. I took half a year maternity leave in the city where he did his PhD, and then I moved back with my baby to Marburg. I still had 9 months practical work to go in the lab. This worked actually much easier than I had always thought, because I shared a flat with 2 very nice colleagues who helped me at home and who helped me in the lab. And when I had to prepare for the oral exam, my parents-in-law were fantastic help. So everything worked quite well, but my life plans to move directly to the US, they of course definitely were not a good idea. I mean, going alone with the baby was not something I wanted to do. And in consequence, at that time, my life really took a very different turn than planned, because I had to find in Göttingen, the city where my spouse was, I had to find a good scientific position, because I was still determined, of course, to continue as a scientist. Unfortunately, there was no lab that did plant sciences in a topic that I would have found interesting. So instead, I then decided, if I can't do plant science, I should look for a lab where I can learn a lot and expand my horizon. So luckily, there was a junior group leader at the Max Planck Institute for biophysical chemistry, And he was not very well known yet, and so he was very happy that he could get an experienced biochemically trained PhD postdoc. I was lucky to have been offered such a position. And so in the end, it worked out very well. But the first year, I have to say, was a very, very hard struggle. Because for many different reasons. First of all, of course, I was quite frustrated that I had to drop my favorite research topic on plant-fungal interaction. That was an adjustment. The second part was that when you change lab, when you change your supervisor, the environment, the research topic, the methods, then things may not work. And in fact, in hindsight, I know that the project simply, the hypothesis has been wrong, but while I was in the middle of the project, there was 1 year where everything I did was failure. Cloning didn't work. So some simple technical things did not work anymore. The project was a failure right from the start. I was supposed to identify a family of proteins in fission yeast. Turns out this family doesn't exist in fission yeast. So this is, after the genome has been sequenced many years later, we could be certain the family doesn't exist there. At that time, I found it really difficult because it hurt really my self-confidence severely. And I was really seriously considering completely dropping out of science. So after a year of total failure on a project that was strange, in a group where people felt that I was a beginner, I came from a position of being having been 4 years in a lab. After so long time, you feel like you're the expert, you know what you're doing, you're very confident. Young students come and ask for your help. This is something, of course, I enjoyed very much, being the one who could also give advice. Now I found myself in a lab where nobody asked for my advice, and my experiments failed the whole time. So, okay. I talked with my boss after a year. We talked at great lengths. He was a very supportive person anyways. He recognized also that this project would lead to nowhere. And luckily, I had made a side observation during my attempts to identify this protein family. I had made a side observation, found a protein that had showed some interesting behavior, and we decided jointly then that I should simply switch research direction. I should drop the project and I should follow on my side observation. And that was really a fantastic way out of the problem. Experiments started to work again. I slowly regained my confidence. And in the end, I actually wrote a nice paper on it. And most importantly, I was able to identify my next lab in the US, in San Diego, got a fellowship from the German Research Foundation. My husband got a fellowship himself as well. And so we could then actually, after a 2-year postdoc, together move to the US. It was then not a lab on plant biochemistry that I joined, because I never wanted to go back again. That didn't feel right, but instead moved on to yet another topic. I decided then, after having worked with plants and then worked with yeast, I then decided to join a lab that worked on mammalian tissue culture cells and start in a field that was about to emerge, that was just emerging, protein sorting in mammalian cells. And when I started that lab, the second transition felt much easier than the first. And this had to do with that, I think the second move, with the second move, I was at a position where I had finally realized a better understanding for what my competencies and my deficiencies are, right? I think right after my PhD, I was overconfident. I was far too much convinced that I know everything and so on. And so it had hurt a lot to realize that this is not true. With the second postdoc, I think I knew much more to start with, but I also was much more modest when it came to judging my own abilities. And that helped a lot. So the second postdoc worked really like a charm. And so for 5 years, I was in a very fortunate position to have a fantastic, growing, nice project. First in nucleocytoplasmic trafficking, and then along the way, again, a coincidence observation that led me to the sumo protein that you just mentioned, and that opened a whole new research field. I have actually realized, seen many PhD students, many postdocs going through the same type of experience when they come from a position where they have gained confidence and then start something novel. Very often, a lot of them go through similar readjustment and similarly difficult time when they change the topic. And so that's why I want to really tell you that it's totally normal, I think, when you change from a position of confidence and security and knowledge into something that you have to start all over again, you know, learning, that things can go wrong and that it feels bad. But you grow out of it only to be much, much stronger, and you learn a lot on the way. And so if that happens to people, I think I would say it's absolutely normal. So you just go through it and you grow stronger with it. So that was the first thing I wanted to really tell. The next point I want to really make is, you know, dual career, what does that actually mean? And I think the key message that I want to give you here is it works beautifully if there is a very clear understanding that your career is as important as my career. So as a couple, you have, and particularly as a couple with children, I mean, you have a lot of things to struggle with. You have two careers that you need to spend a lot of time with. You share your household chores. You have to take care of the child. But if you support each other, and if you're honestly proud of each other's successes, it can work really, really well. And I've very much enjoyed it. I mean, we had difficult times, of course, at many different steps in career. It is a struggle to synchronize two careers, but it's really worth the effort. Yeah, the questions, the challenges that you have start, of course, with the question, who picks up the child from daycare when the daycare calls and says the child is sick? Who does the shopping? Who can stay long hours in the lab? And of course, it also involves the decision how to apply for jobs, when to apply for jobs, and which offers to accept. And so, of course, it means negotiating with each other. And it means accepting that things simply take longer than if you want to make your decisions just by yourself. It's clear. So job searches, we went twice through job searches that take longer than when you're by yourself. But we have also found that dual careers are more and more common in the US and in Europe, where we applied. And the willingness of institutions to help in dual career situations has really significantly increased. So also as a rector of Heidelberg University, this is an issue with which I deal when we try to recruit faculty. It is now absolutely normal to make it an issue, to talk about it early on in recruitment processes, and to come up with creative ways of helping. And in the end, for an institution, I think it is very smart to do it, because once you have established a situation where the family is happy, they will not move again, right? They will not come with counter offers. So also for the leadership, I would really say, it's a good idea to support this. So coming back to my own personal career, we stayed in total nearly 5.5 years in San Diego, La Jolla. We both had very successful postdoctoral periods, plus really a very, very nice and interesting family life, because we enjoyed very much being in this different country, and we traveled a lot. We looked at we visited all the national parks. We spent a lot of time at the beach, learned surfing, boogie boarding. It was really nice. Our son, when he was 6 years old, learned to surf. So we all enjoyed this period and never want to miss it. But then came the point, of course, after roughly 3.5 years, we started to think about the next career step. So we needed to find 2 positions at the level of an assistant professorship. That was what we aimed for. We both applied for 50 positions each. So applications largely in the US, because at that point, we believed that dual careers are much easier in the US to accomplish. Germany, however, was actually much more willing to help than we had anticipated. So they had actually moved along. So in the end, we got 40 rejections each. So, I mean, I think in this career, you learn to live with rejections, but we also got 10 interviews, right? So I think this is a key message I also want to transfer. Whatever you try, when you apply for postdoctoral fellowships, when you apply for any grant, when you apply for jobs, really be prepared. You will get a lot of rejections. You simply have to apply often enough, and it will work. So 50 job applications, 10 interviews, and luckily, in the end, we ended up with 3 opportunities where we both had an offer. One was the University of Chicago, where we both were offered assistant professorships. And then we had 2 options in Germany, one at the Max Planck Institute in Munich and one at a Helmholtz Center in Berlin. It was a very difficult choice because the American position was at a very prestigious university and it offered tenure track. The positions in Germany were the typical 6 years group leader position, no tenure track. One main difference is in the US, you get a starting package and then everybody expects you to write an NIH grant very rapidly. And if you don't get it, you have very little chances to do much research. But you have tenure track, so you have 7 years to get it to work. In the German system, with the 6 years group leader funding, you get excellent funding, which means you can start right from the first moment on to hire competent PhD students and postdocs. You can immediately start with your own research ideas, but then there's no tenure track. So you have to then go on yet another job search for full professorship. So that was something to consider. The other thing that was a very strong pull, of course, our families lived in Germany. We have both siblings. We were very close to our families, and we wanted our son to also become German. He was 8 by the time he was 3 when we moved to the US. He was 8 when we moved back. If he would have stayed much longer in the US, this would have been difficult. He would have then probably wanted to stay for good. So in the end, we decided to go back to Germany, irrespective of the non-tenure track positions. We had a great time at the Max Planck Institute. We both had our independent groups. Careers went very well. We published 12 nice papers. But then, of course, after 4.5 years, we had to start all over again with the job search, this time for full professor positions. Well, this did not work so well. In the end, basically, we decided to live in 2 different cities. So my partner lives at the university, has a professorship at the University of Innsbruck, and I moved first to Göttingen and 4 years later to Heidelberg. Our son was 16 when we made that decision. He joined me. He is now 35, so a long time ago. We are still a couple, and I think, you know, I have my partner. It's much better to have my partner happy in a different city than unhappy at the place where I am. And so for us, this life concept has worked very well. So since 2005, we basically have 2 homes. The next topic I wanted to cover is, you know, the transition from a scientist to an administrator, rector. this is something that I think throughout my whole career, I've been a very enthusiastic scientist, a very dedicated scientist. But I also always enjoyed very much to engage for my peers in one way or the other. And it started already during my early student times. So I was a spokesperson for the students. I was the elected representative of students in the faculty board meeting. I organized together with other students mentoring and training and career advice for young students. So this was a natural part of me. When I was then later a faculty member, I accepted quite a number of additional jobs for the German Research Foundation, the Alexander von Humboldt Postdoctoral Fellowship Organization. I organized courses for students, practical courses. But then I was also the vice dean and the dean of our faculty. And I did that always, enjoyed that very much, also trying to shape the working environment in which we were, trying to help to have a better working environment. And so this balance worked for a long time really, really well. But at some point, I probably overdid it a bit with all the other duties. And then in addition, something in the family happened. My mother got very ill and required extra work, extra attendance. And so this carefully balanced work between community services and your own science, that didn't work out so well anymore. And I always loved science. You know, as long as you do science at the top level, it's fantastic. When you're not at the top level anymore, I mean, I lost the joy when I felt we were not quite at that level anymore. And that basically meant that I started to think about alternatives. So this was something that was in the back of my mind when a headhunter called. And so this is something, opportunities just open. At some point, a headhunter called and asked whether I could consider a different position, whether I would want to move from research to join the board of directors of a big Helmholtz center. The first time this headhunter called, the phone call took about 2 minutes. And I said, no, I'm a full-blown scientist. I don't want to do that. 3 years later, I was again contacted by a headhunter. And at that time, I had already started to think about, I've been 13 years in Heidelberg. Until that point, I had reinvented myself every few years or so. And then after 13 years, not being perfectly satisfied with the level at which our science was going, again, a headhunter called and I listened. And so in the end, I decided to jump and do something new. And, at that point, I was already 59 and felt, okay, there is not so many options anymore, right, to reinvent yourself. At some point, you have to give it a go. So I decided to join the Research Center Jülich as a member of the board of directors. And at that point, I had to give up my own research. It was very clear there was a transition period during which I gave up my own group. Slowly accompanied my lab members. They all found good positions. This all worked very nice. We had learned in Corona times how to interact with each other with video, so it worked decently. I enjoyed the time in Jülich very much. It was a very steep learning curve, 2 years of being immersed into issues and problems and topics that I, as a scientist, had never dealt with. So it was fantastic training and a broadening of my scientific scope, because now I didn't do research myself anymore, but I had the privilege, the enormous privilege, to be allowed to get to know all the fantastic research that was done there, right? From quantum computing to hydrogen technologies to bioeconomy, brain research. All of a sudden, I was supposed to know at least a little bit about all these topics because I was then responsible for them. But I was missing the university. I was missing the students, and when then the rector of Heidelberg University decided to step down prematurely, there was this opportunity to come back to Heidelberg University, and so I decided to throw my hat into the ring and apply again to apply for the rector's position. And now in this combination with having been a good scientist and having now 2 years of training on leadership, I was lucky enough to be offered this position, and I enjoy that very much. And now I'm rector for 15 months, and I would apply again immediately to the position. One last take-home message, perhaps for the young faculty or people who consider faculty, the message that I would give, the advice that I would give is, of course, you will be asked for thousands of duties in addition to your job as a scientist and a teacher, a mentor. My advice would really be to say yes to the very first important and really interesting duty. Pick something that gives you a visibility and a meaning. Pick that quickly, because then you can say no to a lot of boring and frustrating duties. And then be careful that you don't overdo it. Don't take too many duties and do them only step by step. That would be the final advice I think I want to give. And with this, I'm at the end of what I wanted to tell you. And now I'm very happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much. On behalf of all attendees, I would like to thank you for this beautiful talk. I now open the floor to questions. So please enter your questions in the Q&A box. Indicate where you are, what you do. I'll be reading the questions, and I will ask Rektorin Melchior to answer the questions. So let me start here. The first question is coming from Lara Mirai, environmental health student at AUB. What are the most exciting unanswered questions in the field of simulation that you hope to address in the coming years? Now, she said she is not working anymore in research, but perhaps what you hope will be addressed in this research area.
Yeah, so yeah, I closed my lab, that's true, and I think I will not go back to simulation anymore. Luckily, some of my former lab members continue to work on simulation, so the field exists. I think some of the most exciting questions is really, I think simulation has a lot to do with regulating cell fate. And I think going in this direction and looking at how it influences differentiation, how it plays a role in cell fate is something very fascinating. There are hundreds and hundreds of proteins that can be altered by simulation here and there, but I think this modification coordinates many cellular pathways at once. And so finding the common underlying reason why you change the simulation status of hundreds of proteins at once in response to certain signals. I think this is one of the biggest questions. So it's a coordinating modification.
Thank you. This question is from Adam Sarhal, a biology student here at AUB. And he starts by saying, Oprah Winfrey once said that, quote, a mentor is someone who allows you to see hope inside yourself, end of quote. Do you agree with this statement? What could mentors reveal to their mentees? Can mentors decide to hide anything from their mentees?
Okay, so the first question, the first part of the question, I absolutely agree. I do think that the most important role of a mentor is to encourage and show opportunities, offer the advice that is that somebody asks for. I think a mentor is someone who is an experienced friend, a trusted person. A mentor should not be your supervisor. A mentor should not be somebody who is in hierarchy connected to you. A mentor should be somebody who is, your lab boss can be a fantastic supervisor, but usually not really your mentor. A mentor is a good friend who can give you advice to develop in a positive way. The second question, can a mentor hide something? I'm not totally sure I understand the question right. I think when I served as a mentor, I'm a very open person and I'm not shy to speak about personal experience and share that. I think you may have realized that. There are many ways of how to be a mentor, and many mentors decide that there are certain topics about which they are very ready to speak, and there are other topics about which they don't want to speak. This issue of dual career, family, is a very personal one, and I know many mentors who would not touch that. And so if you are looking for a mentor, what we did in our mentoring programs, we have questionnaires that the mentors and the mentees need to first answer before you can make a matchmaking. Which are the topics you want to talk about? Which are the topics in which you seek advice? And which are the topics that you as a mentor are willing to talk about? And that needs to match, otherwise the mentor-mentee relationship cannot work.
Thank you. This question is coming from Lisa Pescher. I think she's from Wiley. Thank you for the great talk. You said that you support dual careers when recruiting at the University of Heidelberg or Heidelberg University. Are there any specific measures of support? If yes, how do they look like? Are you considering leaving Wiley?
Thank you for the question. It depends a little bit on the career level where we can help. So in individual faculties, in individual institutes, help can sometimes already be given at the level of postdocs or at the level of young group leaders. When I deal with it, and I'm only 15 months in office, so I don't have so much experience yet. But what we do is when we look at look for professorship candidates, the search committees ask that question, whether there is need required, whether or they rephrase it, we phrase it in a way, is there something that we can do to help? Is there a partner who needs help? And then it depends a lot on what the partner does. One aspect is, of course, simply connecting with industry in the area, connecting with faculties, connecting with other research institutes. We have the German Cancer Center next door, we have the EMBL next door. So one aspect is simply spreading the word, identifying positions where this person fits. But we can also take a little bit of money to offer 1 year, 2 years funding if that doesn't work. So to provide time for the person. We cannot pull out, and that's a different situation in the US. At a German university, the number of professorships is fixed. You can't, just because there is another fantastic person, create a new professorship. That does not work. So you can only hope that in the area another professorship becomes vacant and is advertised. But we can give money for postdoc, for a salary for a year or for 2 years, and we can connect with other people in the community.
Thank you. This question is from Dr. Iman Sbaiti. She is a surgical oncologist here at our AUB-MC, AUB Medical Center. I always take pride when I refer to Iman, who's a good friend of mine. I always refer to her to be, and she was, and still is, the first female surgeon at AUB-MC. We had MRVP workshops last Saturday. We had around 300 students attending, and she gave one of the sessions, and it was really amazing. She is the biggest supporter of our MRVP, and she has mentored the largest number of students in MRVP, and many of them co-authored papers, undergraduate students co-authoring papers with her as a medical oncologist. So her question and comment. Thank you for the inspiring talk. Do you feel you faced or will face glass ceiling effect in leadership as a woman? Any advice for women in leadership how to bypass this existing obstacle?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I think I personally never felt the glass ceiling. I mean, if I look through my career, I mean, I ended up being only the second woman here in Heidelberg, leading one of the most successful, most prominent Heidelberg German universities. So I think I broke through glass ceilings, if there were any, that I personally did not feel. But I think the most important aspect that sets me perhaps aside from many other women who I followed when I looked at their careers, I think I had the courage to ask for things. So to give an example, when we took positions at the Max Planck Institute, there was initially only one position. That one was offered to my partner, to my spouse. Because we had other offers in Chicago and in Berlin, I visited the institute and I told them that we would be happy to come if they offer me also an adequate package. I asked for it, and in the end, they gave it to me. If I wouldn't have asked, if I would have just accepted what they initially offered, then I think my career that would have failed. But I had the way it worked, actually, I spent a long time with a very good friend of mine who mentored me, who coached me the evening before I went to that institute. What do I want to offer? What is the compromise I'm going to make? Where do I say no? And sorry, my husband loves your position, but no, we are going to Chicago instead because your offer is not good enough for me. So that was something very important. I think I see far too many women who don't dare to ask. And that's a huge obstacle, I would say. So that is something where I think one can really also, as a mentor, should really encourage, empower, and because usually I found throughout my whole career that people were not upset when I asked, when I requested. It was the contrary. Actually, it was the contrary. I always found that you earn respect when you dare to ask for what you own.
Thank you. This question is coming from Fatima Fneish. She is AUB Math. She's a graduate student in the math department at AUB. And she's asking what advice you can add on the way one support and repower himself, herself, after a period of weakness in her scientific journey.
It's a difficult question because it depends, of course, on particular reasons why. Usually, I think, so what has helped for me in the particular story that I told you, of course, was that I spoke at great lengths with my supervisor, and we decided that we need to change the situation. Sometimes you bang your head following the wrong theory. You try an experiment which simply doesn't work because you made it too complicated. I think really trying to change perspective is the most important thing. Sometimes we are so much put on one particular path and we think we need to go, and if we hit a brick wall, I think we need to learn to go around. So if something really fails and if something is really frustrating, then try to stop, and think about whether there are alternative routes to reach your goal. Whether that means in a lab simply changing the experimental approach that you take, or whether it really means considering whether you're in the wrong environment and you need to change your environment, or you need to perhaps find a different research team, a different group where you're better put. This depends, of course, on what it is. But I think that would be my advice. Really try to consider that sometimes moving to the side or even 3 steps back allows you to go around a brick wall.
I have a sensor in my office. I have to move every once in a while so that the light will come on. So this question is from Sarah As-Sakaf. Thank you so much for this great and eye-opening talk. My question is, if I applied for a position that aligns with my interests, but I may not get it due to some reason, and I have been approached by a senior colleague for another position that I do not have experience in, and I am hesitant to apply for, what do you advise, Professor Melchior? In this case, what do you think I should consider?
Hey, it's a difficult question again. I think there is no simple answer without knowing the exact circumstances. But I think very often, and this, I think I find this more often with females than with males, we think we are not suitable. We think we are not experienced enough, but we are. And so we should dare to try something. I have been extremely fortunate at some point in my career. I thought, at some point it was clear our Munich position came to an end. I should now start to apply for professorships. And I felt I was ready for associate professor level. And I didn't consider myself ready for full professor position. So I applied for associate professor level. And then I was contacted by the head of a search committee for a professorship, for a full professorship. He contacted me, he called me and asked whether I wouldn't want to apply. There was a position open. And it shocked me totally because it was for a full professor position with a denomination that I felt would not fit at all, right? It was human genetics. And I felt I'm a biochemist, a molecular biologist. I can't apply for a professorship in human genetics. But because he called me and he said he knew my research, he found it great, and he would encourage me, I did. I applied. And in the end, I was invited for an interview, and I was not made I didn't get the offer. I was number 3 or so on the list. I was totally excited and happy, and it gave me the confidence to apply to other full professor positions, which in the end I actually got, right? I got immediately out of the 6 years junior group leader position, I got a full professorship in Göttingen. I wouldn't have applied, and I'm really a confident person, and I was most of the time in my life I was a confident person, but I did not think I was ready. And so the approach by other people who believed in me helped me a lot. So in that sense, my answer would be, if somebody else trusts you that you can do that, perhaps trust a little bit more in yourself and apply and try it.
One of the professors in the chemistry department at your university, at Heidelberg University, Uwe Bonds, I'm sure you know him. When I was a postdoc at Georgia Tech, Uwe was professor over there. And we were on the same floor. And sometimes I actually used the machines in his lab, particularly the DSC. And it was always fun to talk to him. He has his own character, which is a very fun character. So I look forward to see Uwe. This question is coming from Fatima Sunji, who is a chemical engineering student at AUB. She said Aristotle was a disciple of Socrates, yet Aristotle chose to break from his mentor's teachings. In this context, what are ingredients that could break the mentor-mentee relationship?
Now that depends now a little bit what we mean with mentor-mentee. So what comes to my mind first is the professor in whose lab I did my senior postdoc period was a fantastic boss. I couldn't have found a better one. And in many ways, he also was a mentor for me, even though I said before that, you know, your boss is not really perhaps your mentor. But at some point, it became very clear that it's time that I move on. And you can start realizing that when in a group seminar, you start to disagree too often with your boss. You start to, at some point, think, you know better than he or she does. Then it's time to leave. It's a little bit with, young deer, old deer. It's a little bit with father and son, right? At some point, you grow out of it and you need to do your own thing. And I think similarly, probably in mentor-mentee relations that are not in this direct, strong connection, it's the same thing. Very often mentor-mentee relations, they're only for a limited time because you agree that you need advice on certain decisions in your current life. And so you may have found a mentor who is for that particular transition in your life the best possible mentor you can find. But after you make the transition, perhaps that is not the right person anymore. So then you have to find another mentor.
Thank you. We will keep it till 7:15 as I promised you. I have a list of very interesting questions, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
I have time. Don't worry. I
Okay,
have time.
thank you. This question is from Saeed Al-Qaisi, a UB biology student. First of all, thank you so much for such an inspiring talk. Your entire academic professional journey between the US and Germany while maintaining a family is something we don't hear much in this field. Do you have more advice for individuals with dual careers and how to manage personal relationships amidst the very demanding career path you are in?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is of course something that is depending so much on your personal circumstances that giving concrete advice is difficult. But what for us was really important is this very clear and mutual understanding that we are proud of each other, we support each other. And as I said, your career is as important as my career. In much more practical terms, what it meant, for example, when we moved to the US, we were both postdocs, we were both starting a new project in two separate labs in the same institute. We agreed very quickly on sharing time, dividing time. So there was 2 evenings per week where I could stay as long as I wanted in the lab. There were 2 evenings per week where my partner could stay as long in the lab as he wanted. And the other 3 evenings we shared. We were together as a family. So we gave each other freedom because being an experimental scientist means, of course, that sometimes you can plan your experiment as well as possible. Something goes wrong and you need the extra 3 hours. Otherwise, your experiment fails. Or you can't just let everything go. In chemistry, not in chemistry, not in many experimental projects, not. And when we divided that, we had much less conflicts, much less hassle than we had before when we always tried to negotiate it on an individual, coincidental situation. Daycare calls, child is sick, someone has to let everything go and run and pick up the child. So we started to plan our days accordingly. On days where I knew I had to go home, pick up our child, take care of the shopping, whatever, I put things that I can easily interrupt, that are not difficult, are theoretical work, whatever. And on the long days, I planned my complicated experiments. And that has helped us to get a feeling for fairness and Because if you start to argue with each other whose experiment is more complicated, more important, that's not a good situation.
Thank you. This question is from Ahmad Akhdar. He's medical lab science undergrad here student. He's also the coordinator of my TRED team. His question, statement, many women in academia worry that starting a family might negatively impact their careers. Based on your own experience, what do you think are the biggest challenges women face when balancing parenthood and scientific research? And how can institutions better support them?
Yeah. Let me start by saying I feel I built a great career because I had a child and not despite having a child. And that is simply because I feel workaholic can be sometimes really in your way. If you have a child, you can't be too much of a workaholic because once in a while you have to spend the weekend at the beach, right? And it's good for your own mental health and it's good for your child. So irrespective of that state, I mean, I strongly believe in that because at some point, if you work too much and things fail, you start to be very bitter, and that is not the best possible way to turn into somebody who is also a motivating supervisor for your own students. You need to have a positive and optimistic attitude, I think, if you want to lead a lab later on, if you want to lead a team. And in order to have that positive attitude, you do need to find some happiness in your life, and your children can help you with that as well. But more in practical terms, I think for me, I think really the most important point is institutions should help in the very clear understanding that childcare is something that is a duty of parents, male and female alike. And so on the one hand, we need to help having enough childcare possibilities. We need to have flexible childcare so that our young parents can attend meetings and still be certain that the children are in good hands. So the flexibility is important. It's also very important to make clear that it's perfectly okay for the young father to take care of the child as much as the young mother. If the parents share the work is only half for the woman and half for the man. And it's then much better doable for both. We still have this attitude that childcare is the duty of the female scientist. And then, of course, the women have double duty and the men only single duty. And I think we need to change that. We need to make it much more normal that the father runs and picks up the child when the child is sick. The father does the shopping as well. So that's something where I think we need to go. We are not there yet. And as long as we are not there yet, we really have to give maximum support with respect to, making it possible that women work successfully. In topics where health is an issue, where our laws in Germany are very strict. Female scientists, when pregnant, are not allowed to do certain experiments in biosciences, in chemistry. And so that is a huge hurdle, of course, if you have to stop experiments that you do. One way we can support there is that we finance a technician position for a few months during the pregnancy and perhaps also during breastfeeding time. We can finance student helpers. These are aspects that can definitely make a difference also, and that an organization can perhaps do to support.
Thank you. This question is from Leticia Busamra, who's working in my lab. She is chemistry senior student. Actually, she graduated. She is spending 1 year leave while taking some pre-med courses to join the medical school. She was last year the president of the ACS student chapter, and she is a wonderful public speaker. And today she is so proud she got her first final compound, pure, in my lab, and she got the carbon 13, and she is so proud about it. So her question is, as an accomplished mentor and leader, what qualities do you believe are most important for a mentor to have?
For a mentor to have? Oh, I think you should ask the mentees.
Good point.
Yeah, but I think for a mentor, I think you need to be clear about what you are willing to share and what you're not willing to share. I mean, this comes back to what we had before. To be able to listen, to be able to, if possible, help your mentee to find the answer. Not give the answer, but allow your mentee to find the answer.
I should add that Leticia has been tweeting live during this mentoring talk and tagging Heidelberg University, Angewandte, AUB, and me, and I have been retweeting, but I am not checking what she is writing, so she takes responsibility. Okay. Next question is from Lean Azobi, who's also a chemistry student here at AUB. She states, I really admire your wisdom, honesty, and all the life advice. Her question is, how do you balance the demands of a leading researcher with that of being the Rektorin of Heidelberg University? You already addressed that you are not doing research at the moment, but probably she is also talking about the work-life, work-family balance and that, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so up to the decision to join the Research Center Jülich and really go into, the management and the leadership of a big institute. When I was a dean, when I was a vice dean, when I did community services with the German Research Foundation, it was a bit of a struggle to find the right balance, but I took more and more. I had my child young. I was 26 when my son was born, and I started to take more and more additional responsibilities when I got older, and our son didn't need me anymore so much. Now he's 35, right? So at the moment, so I started to take more and more responsibility in addition to being a full-blown and engaged scientist when family duties declined. So I think that was most important. Now I'm 61, 61, 62. I'm sorry, I'm 62. And, our son lives in Berlin. My partner lives in Innsbruck. During the week, I have plenty of time. And in that sense, it works. There were periods in my life when I really found freedom also to pick up singing again. I enjoyed that a lot. It was a hobby I rediscovered a few years ago, but that I had to let go when I decided to go into leadership of the institution. For that, I don't have time. But, in 6 years, I'm retiring probably, and then I pick up my hobbies again and do a lot of travel with my husband.
Thank you. This question is coming from Brigitte Wex, or in German, Brigitte Wex, who happens to be my wife. She is an organic professor at our sister university, the Lebanese American University. She states, thank you for sharing all these wonderful details of your professional, personal journey. You have mentioned all these segments across your career. How do you prepare for the inadvertently upcoming new stage in your career while you are at a career high?
How do I prepare for retirement? Is that
Well, when you have very high position and you're still planning to go higher, so how do you prepare for that?
I think I never really prepared for it. So throughout my career, things appeared in a way. So after being postdoc for a few years, I started to feel that it's time to move on. So I think things came natural. Most of the time, things came natural. This was change from being a scientist at Heidelberg University to being in the board of directors at Research Center Jülich. This was something, as I said, I had twice a call from a headhunter, 3 years difference. The first time I didn't care about the invitation. 3 years later, I was somehow ready. So things came, and when it was the right time, it fell on fertile ground. And then I started to think about it. I did not proactively search for a new possibility, actually, to be honest. Yeah. And so I think, yeah, with the rest of my life, I'm expecting it will go. I mean, there's so many interesting things one can do privately or professionally. I don't worry about next steps.
This question is coming from Singju Moon. He is a chemistry senior student here at AUB. And this question, what advice would you give to young professionals seeking leadership role in academia, especially to student chemists just starting research? He's talking about himself. He's one of our top students in the department.
Yeah. So I think one advice I can really give when you transition from being a PhD student to finding your postdoctoral position, I think this is a very important career transition. I think choose your postdoc lab very, very wisely. Don't look just for, a famous supervisor. Really look into, is this supervisor a good supervisor for you? Is that a person who promotes his youngsters? Can you look, I mean, you can find this out quite easily when you look at publications of that lab. So what happened to the people who were first authors on famous papers? Did they build a career on their own? Did the supervisor let them go with an exciting project to take out of the lab and develop a new project? So when I chose my second postdoc in the US, I actually did that. And I also, when I went for the interview to this lab, I asked my professor, my putative host, I told him, I want to join your lab. I want to work first, of course, on your projects, but my aim, my hope is that I can develop something in your lab that you will allow me later to take with me when I apply for an assistant professorship. Is that something you do? Will you let me go? Will you allow me to develop a project on my own? And he said yes. And of course, I then also talked with the postdocs in his lab, individually without him. And I asked all of them, does he let people go with their own project? And when you look at famous labs, you find some famous labs who have produced a lot of offspring, produced a lot of people who later were also professors. And you see some other very famous labs who have never, ever produced any offspring. So choose carefully.
I second that big time. This question is coming from Fatima Laqiz, a biology student junior, and she is stating she is pre-med. She want to let us all know she want to go to medical school. Her question is, what were the biggest challenges you faced when starting out as a woman in science, and how did you overcome them? You addressed some of them in your
I addressed some of them a bit. I think having enough confidence. Don't let, so as I said, when I started to study chemistry, we as students invited chemists from industry once per year into the lecture hall to give us career talks about different aspects of, all the big chemical industry, BASF, Hoechst, Bayer, all the famous German big companies. They came and they told us about how is it to work as a chemist in industry, in research or in production or whatever. Every year throughout my studies, they would tell us they would not hire women, period. And when we asked them why, I mean, they gave answers such as, you can't possibly believe that a woman has the authority to be boss of blue-collar workers. They will not respect her because she is a woman. I think, luckily, I was brought up by my parents, both working mom, working dad. They imprinted a lot of confidence in me, and that was, I think, my biggest fortune that I had. Even though we heard over and over again we wouldn't get jobs anyways, I didn't care. I didn't believe it, and I just trusted that time will come. And so I joined demonstrations in Hanover where women in natural sciences demonstrated because they had severe problems to find a practical in constructions. So if you wanted to be an architect, for example, or an engineer, you had to work on a construction site for a few months. That was part of the training. But females would not find a practical because construction companies told them that they don't have a toilet for women. And law is they have to have a toilet. If they have a woman, they have to have a toilet. And because they don't have a toilet and don't want to build a toilet for a single female, they don't employ them. And so I think women faced many, many obstacles. And I joined protests and so on, but I personally always found ways around, luckily, and I had the confidence to just go on.
I'm going to ask you two more questions, if you allow me.
Sure.
Not to take more of your time. This question is coming from Ronnie Diab, biology student. Can you share an important moment in your career where you felt that you broke through a barrier or contributed to improving representation for women in science?
Well, of course, at many steps in my career, because very often there were not so many women. But perhaps I can give another, I turn it around. When I felt I got more courage and was inspired by fantastic females. The first time that I remember is when I moved to the UK to spend this half year at the University of Bristol. Coming from Germany, not having seen any female professor, we didn't have any at my department, we didn't even have a female group leader. And I came to the UK, and in the UK, the Department of Organometallic Chemistry, again, there were no female professors, but there were excellent female scientists as postdocs. And so I still remember an American female postdoc. She gave a lecture in the big lecture hall. And actually, it was the first time that I heard a female give a fantastic, brilliant speech, because up to that point, I had not been exposed to females and who spoke with confidence. I had seen some females in Germany who applied for a habilitation position or whatever, but who were very much lacking confidence. And so they had no chance to get the job that they applied for, simply because of their whole attitude of being anxious and not knowing whether they are good enough. And there was this American postdoc with all the American confidence, and she gave a brilliant talk, and she was a very great inspiration for me. Later, a few years later, when I was a postdoc in the US, up to that point, so in my chemistry training, there was one particular really nasty professor who made comments about females only get good grades because they open their blouse, right? That was, yeah, he got away with these types of comments. And so that, of course, led to us having only jeans and pullovers up to here, right? And so I felt that I had to dress like no sign of being female or anything like that, just to avoid a reputation that you only get good grades because you're too sexy or so. That changed only late in my studies when I started to see and experience women who were fantastic, inspiring researchers and had absolutely no normal relation to also being very pretty, very inspiring, very female, and it was not a contradiction. And I still remember a fantastic female cell biologist at a huge conference in the US, because I made a mental note. I mean, I noted that this is fantastic, that it works. She had very long blonde hair, very long flowing clothes, very, very womanish, and had such an air of confidence and competence. That was amazing. And it was for me, again, a revelation. There are no contradictions there, right? You can be absolutely a woman, and can be absolutely confident. You don't have to hide that. So these were great inspirations for me.
The last question from the attendees. Then I'll give the floor to Dr. Suzanne if she wants to ask any questions. Jana Huhu from Business Administration. How has working with researchers from different scientific disciplines enriched your study of sumo proteins? Can you share an example of a successful collaboration? She wants you to talk about the importance of collaboration in research, basically.
Absolutely. Actually, I have collaborated in my own sumo field with many different researchers in different disciplines. I have quite a large number of joint publications. So I'm a chemist moving to biochemistry, moving to molecular biology. But we did collaborate with people on the two other spectra of research in cell biology. We collaborated with mouse people on the one hand, and we also collaborated with structural biologists on the other hand. So I do have collaborations with people who do cryo-electron microscopy, crystallography, molecular dynamics. I do have collaborations with people who do a lot of mouse work, or I should say, with mouse work. This has been absolutely necessary, I think, in my field, because the methods in life sciences have expanded so much, have broadened so much, that a single lab doesn't have the competencies to use the full scale of methods that allow you to answer the questions you want to answer. So I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary collaborations, very clearly.
Sorry. Dr. Toby, would you like to add anything, ask any questions?
I really don't want to extend time more than we should. I guess a short question is, I think you've been very fortunate to have worked in different environments and different cultures, going from the US and Germany. Was there anything that stood out in terms of the cultural differences within the labs you worked and the environments you worked that either was a shock or inspiring, or, had some kind of effect or impact?
Very, very strongly indeed. When I moved from Germany to the US, it was a great revelation. I was very fortunate that we moved to the US at that point, when we did, because I graduated in 1990, and we moved as a family to the US in 1992. So really long time ago. At that point, research in Germany in the bio faculties was still quite hierarchical. Very top-down hierarchies, PhD students being afraid of their professors, discussions that were very much top-down. Professor is always right, and as a master student, you can't dare to have your own opinion. This has changed tremendously in Germany. It's very different now, but at that point, I came from an environment that was in most part very hierarchical. My junior group leader boss was clearly different, but the big department head, people were afraid of him. I mean, I think he didn't want that, but people were afraid of him. When I moved to the US, I realized a very different culture of discussion. Didn't matter whether it was the lab rotation student or the professor who phrased an opinion, as long as it was scientifically justified, everybody had the right to have an opinion and everybody could be right? And the professor could be wrong. So that was an enormous difference. And it was a huge revelation for me, because it made science so much more productive. It made lab meetings inspiring, and we could really exchange with each other ideas, and we could criticize each other's experiments without people being offended by that, or without being afraid that the boss now thinks, you're not good enough or whatever. I enjoyed that a lot. That was a major difference. The other difference had to do with the acceptance of mothers as, valuable scientists. In Germany, at that point, I felt having a child and still wanting to excel in science was something not considered normal. About half the people that I encountered or who encountered me felt, oh, how fantastic that she does it, how great. And the other half felt, how dare she, she is a bad mother. And for nobody considered me absolutely normal. So when we came to the US, that we had a child was no big deal. You have a child, nice. How old is your child? Okay, I have a child too, and topic done, right? It was absolutely nothing to wonder about. It was just normal. And that was an enormous relief, because all of a sudden I felt I don't have to constantly justify myself anymore. I'm just one normal postdoc who has a family, and that's it. Yeah. Luckily, I would say now here in Germany, in good institutions, we have now the same situation. Luckily, it's a big change over. Well, it's 30 years, right? It's more than 30 years back.
Thank you very much. I want to use this opportunity again to thank you for your time and to appreciate your amazing and very inspiring mentoring talk, and for honoring us with all of this. I hope I will have the chance to host you here at our beautiful campus at AUB in Beirut. And I want to thank all the attendees. We kept you a little late. Until our 33rd mentoring talk, which will be delivered by Nobel laureate Jean-Marie Le on February 19th, I wish you a great evening, and thank you all. You have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.